Following this book and the article Daisetsu Suzuki wrote when I was born, that was the year 1978, I have been talking about the background, how the tribalism and the religion can have the interrelationship for evolutionary process moving forward as human. And his point was comparing, for example, Indian tribe or the Jewish tribe, Buddhism, Christianity, or Chinese with a background of Taoism, pragmatism. So there are certain historical evolutionary process we may understand if we can get the idea of each of those religions and each of those tribes and what appealed them. So after talking about those in Christianity and Buddhism and so forth, we haven't touched much more on the Japanese tribe, if we call that. And of course, because of the influence, the trend, a movement from India to China affected in Japan. They had their own Shinto religion, but let's look into how the situation has evolved, if I may say so, to fit to the temperament of Japanese, especially related to Buddhism. So according to Daisetsu, the way they call it the other power, not your own will to achieve something, the other power may be called as the power of God or power of the laws of universe, so that instead of you not being able to express, there's a God and the laws of universe that you may relate to be able to, for us to expand further. So there's a connection to the infinite wisdom and compassion, so to speak, as represented by God, or Amida Buddha in this case that he's going to talk about with this other power. So Zen is considered as self-power because you have to have certain level of energy, spirit, determination, and somewhat intellectual capability, as well as questioning what's the meaning of life, why do I suffer, and try to work from the brain point of view. But for those who are this is self-power, other power is to not to go through that process, as in the case of Shinran. So the Pure Land sect had the idea originally coming from India, other power, Amida Buddha. In China, it expanded, and in Japan, it came to a very interesting way, because as much as Chinese are pragmatic, Japanese has its own way of digesting the Zen and other power in their own way, for the Zen to prevail, as well as other power, Pure Land or the Shin Buddhism, to spread out widely, mainly because of Shinran's contribution and, of course, the Chinese influence up to that point. So if you look at the other power as interpreted by the Japanese and Shinran, can be explained as very straightforward, pragmatic way, saying that instead of going through the self-power, why don't you jump across, not going through the meditation and the devotion fully to process understanding of what Buddha may have done. So Shinran's case, from his young days, he spent, I think, 12 years or maybe more in going through the process from the age 9 or some such thing. And he couldn't just do it. And then came with the Honen, who brought this idea of other power and pure Pure Land sect of Buddhism, and he grabbed on it, saying that I cannot do this. This is too tough, and I didn't get it after so many years of training or meditation. So he knocked the door of Honen, and they got together, and Shinran understood that this idea of Amida Buddha is that he has already awakened after so much training, and his view is after awakening he was to provide all the compassion he got for all living beings to be enlightened or be happy, so to speak. And how to do that? The approach is just trust. So that's the point, that the religion can be dangerous if you trust the wrong person or wrong idea and get your unconscious connected to that. It becomes such a strong power, such that certain cult can be seen so crazy. But in this case, I'm not be able to go into detail, but all the studies and sutras and preparation and the teaching, and especially for Shinran to talk not at the higher level of the society and the samurai and those who grabbed the Zen idea, but going into the common people. He was kicked out of Kyoto, and he went to the remote part of Japan, and that was one of the incidents that I view helped the Shin Buddhism to expand in an easy to understand way, that if you believe in Amida Buddha to help you because he was enlightened, there's a promise in certain sutra, and all you need to do is Namo Amida Butsu. Pray Amida Buddha's vow to help people. That's what it means. Namu is let go of yourself, Amida Butsu, Amida Buddha. So you let go for Amida's vow. And there's a term called Kiho Ittai, which means you is Ki and Ho is Dharma or Amida. Those two become one, because one throw out himself for the compassion Amida. So what happens if that belief penetrates through you, as Shinda pointed, by saying about Amida and talking or reviewing certain sutra, not the long one, like Prajna Sutra, 600 volumes, this and that. This is a little simpler, but with the evidential evidence as discussed from the point of view of sutra, Shinran formulated or gathered the information necessary to convey the message of Amida Buddha as an agent, so to speak. So Myokonin, for example, I talk about the Saichi quite often, but there are other people like Osono or Shoma and Genza and many others. They are from a lay background, even sometimes, or quite often actually, not being able to write down. But they believed it because there is certain pressure in the society at the lower level, and what can you do? Your intellect doesn't go much farther, and here is that the religion that helps them, that there's a way. All you have to do is let go of yourself for Amida's vow to help you. So there's a sutra related to that, but without going into it, Daisetsu was saying that Namo Amida Butsu can take care of it, and this may correspond to Japanese tribesmen, their characteristics of maybe a little primitive or not primitive, but they have their needs. But they're simple-minded people, and then relating to also Shintoism, which is the hierarchy that the certain God created Japan, and there's a way to process devoting themselves. So with that background, this other power is somewhat similar with Christianity, but without the sense of blood and this physical and the fighting and the difficulties that they go through. And therefore there could be very, how do you call it, suppressed sense, but in a different way, without much of those blood and fighting idea, but maybe related to the Shintoism, that melting into the nature, as I often talk about. There are certain law of the universe manifesting, and we can be related and feel happy, enlightened in that state, without going through the intellectual path or the difficulty to progress, arguing and fighting, but rather melting into the nature and letting go themselves to the nature, in case of Shin Buddhism, but also Tariki, not Shin Buddhism, Shinto, but also Shin Buddhism, which is pointing that the Namu Amida Butsu is a simple way. And it's not that simple, obviously. We have intellect, and how can you believe anything which is not to be proven, especially at the beginning? But because of Shinran's work in the remote part of Japan and working until the age 90, I think he lived a very long time and passed on that message, not in Kyoto and the central part of Japan, but more of a peripheral. But right now, the number of people who are into Shin Buddhism is the highest in the Japanese old sect, to the point that many people can relate to that. The reality is that how much of them get enlightened or transforming themselves to relate to Amida Dvo and practice this, there's a question about it, because like anything else, how much are you devoting for that, and how can you have that moment of enlightenment, just like in Satori, in Zen. In Shin Buddhism, there's the Shinjin Ketsujo. The belief system is clarified when you have that incident. And that's the difference between the Zen to be more of a self-initiated and pointing, for example, Zen saying you're sitting on top of the mountain and everything is good, that kind of a confidence. But rather the opposite of it is that the Shin Buddhism and the approach of letting you go away, not self-power. At the end, self-power has to go to be enlightened, because you have a limit. But that's the forcing them to go through the limit was Zen approach, and the Shin Buddhism approach is not forcing, but believing that that is the end solution that you get. So that's the logic behind it by Shinran with all the sutras and his teaching, and also working with the people at the ground level, and that has worked out to the point that compared to the Zen, Shin Buddhism spread out with a belief system. So that's the background. And Daisetsu point Saichi, one of the Myokonin in Shin Buddhism, talking about his poem. So here it is. The one I let go of my happiness is the two word Namu, which means let go, or let go for Amida Buddha. But Namu usually is let go, the initial part of it. So with that, my pleasure is with Namu. I'm letting go myself. As a result, it doesn't say as a result, but what it implies is that Saichi himself, dondoko, always work, work, work. Now I'm letting you to take over my suffering, so I'm left to work with saying Namu Amida Butsu, pointing like appreciation of Amida Buddha. So being easy to live is pleasure, and to be awakened with this is good. And then I can be free, liberated to spend my time in this world as I live, or some such translation of his poem. So this is the Saichi who carved the wood sandal and produced 7,000-8,000 poems. It's one of them. And when he was producing this one, he was about 70 years old, and he worked in the 3 rice pad tatami mat place, carving the geta, which is the wooden sandal, and he wrote down those poems. And with the pleasure of meeting and connecting to Amida Buddha, and be happy to live every day, working every day with an Amnami Abhidhabutsu. So in Shintoism, compared to this Shin Buddhism, the original Japanese religion, there's a purity and straightforwardness as a main thing and relating to nature, but that doesn't have the inspiration related or come with the spiritual end of it. So with that background still, that if you can go through the difficulty of life to pass through with pure mindedness to clarify what's needed, and then with such background in Japan, there may not have been a person like Saichi to come and connect to Amida Buddha and leave those poems and live accordingly. In case of Indian Buddhism, certain constraint, discipline is needed. Also, intellectual idea has to go with it. On top of it, samadhi is needed. But in China, when it transferred, it get into Zen and the pointing into human mind and go through Zen-like training and stuff like that. Without that, they couldn't go through that the spiritual enlightenment. And then that was in Zen, and it came to Japan. But along with it is this Saichi-like idea of other power. So here's another poem. He says, if I see your face, it's amazing. And if you see me, it is that you are me and I am you, and Namu and Amida is you and me. Or such poem. So it's straightforward, in my view, that if you are letting go of yourself by Namu, and then Amida Buddha to take over, there's that relationship that I also found some Christianity. Brother Rollins is the one that just picked up. He was in one of those ministry, I believe, in the kitchen, and he was always connecting to God as if a friend, or of course revering, but melting into the relationship with him and the God is becoming a direct communicating situation, some such thing. So with such an idea of relationship, and you is reflected on the God, and God reflected on me, and which is kind of like remind me of the eye of Meister Eckhart in Christianity. Though I look at God, it's that God look at me through my eye. So it's the same point, without intellect, but with belief and jumping across to get to the same level of understanding, so to speak. And that's what this Saichi's story is pointing. Feasible without the deliberation, difficulties of understanding sutra and so forth, but the belief system can bring that end result of awakening and be happy to live given the situation. So there is interesting point that we see in the historical development of religion in Japan. We talked about this Christianity and Buddhism mainly, but also Chinese Taoism and others that can go with a similar kind of flow depending upon the situation, the mentality of the people and the need, and that progresses and they move to the different religion, different tribes, and how they get interpreted, digested, and come out to as if to connect the spirit of the original founder of those religions or spiritual awakening that may have happened long time ago can be passed on to different people, different religion, but with the same spirit expressed in a different manner. I think there's one more segment to finish, but that's the end of this, and I hope there may be some interesting finding that you could feel. Everybody's different. How you or we react will be different. And some spark may happen, may not happen because of the background, the habitual pattern and so forth. But still, to know those different avenues, different ways, different historical background and how things can or cannot happen may help us for each to understand and find the way going forward. That's what I think we can learn out of this kind of a study. Thank you.